Tutsi of the Coast Salish peoples on the lands of the Lower Skagit, Tulalip, Swinomish, Stillaguamish, and Suquamish, who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin since time immemorial, who have hunted, fished, and gathered here, and who have taken care of these lands. We respect their sovereignty and their rights to self-determination, and we honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. Please join us in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude to the Indigenous people of this territory for their enduring care and protection of this land, which we currently occupy and share through the Treaty of Point Elliott, signed by 82 tribes in Mukilteo on January 22nd, 1855. And in that spirit of honoring, I'd like to just draw to folks' attention. In 2021, Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland established the Federal Boarding School Initiative to investigate burial sites associated with boarding schools and to examine the intergenerational trauma caused by the federal government's laws and policies promoting forced relocation and cultural assimilation of Indigenous children in the United States from 1819 through the 1960s. In a memo of direction to her department, Secretary Haaland wrote, "While it may be difficult to learn of the traumas suffered in the boarding school era, understanding its impacts on communities today cannot occur without acknowledging that painful history. Only by acknowledging the past can we work toward a future we are all proud to embrace." The first report from the Federal Boarding School Initiative is due to the Secretary by April 1st, 2022. And I hope we will all make time to learn from their findings, to sit with the weight of what they uncover, to witness more of the truth of our shared history, and to move towards reparations and collective healing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, not only for the usual reading, but for adding that on. That's an important deadline. I very much agree. Thank you. Just a reminder that this is a business meeting. It is a meeting of the school board in public to get our business done. We do have a period for public comment in addition to the presentations we're going to hear tonight. So if you would like to join in on that public comment, again, please leave your name and first and last name and location on a list at the back. Christy's got her hand up there. Mrs. Caro's got her hand up back there. And we can get you on the list to speak then. If you are joining us online, we have 7 folks online right now with us. If you're joining us online and would like to comment, please leave, again, just like a sign up, leave your name and location in the Q&A, and that'll let us know that you want to comment, and then you can type up your Q&A at your leisure, but we will know that it's coming in. One thing that has been requested, I want to note that at the back table there, we have some administrators from our school district, principals, assistant superintendent, folks like that. They're here if there's particular expertise that we need them for, and also just so they can see what we're doing, so they can keep tabs on us. I will now move along to the agenda and the minutes. Barring, I'm trying to remember the exact wording on this. Barring any objection, we'll approve the agenda and minutes as presented. Hearing none, the agenda and minutes are approved as presented. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there any objection to the consent agenda as presented? I did want to note that in the approval of the Southwood field trip, it mentioned 10 sack lunches, but a good deal more than that, students. So that might be something to chase down. But hearing no objection, the consent agenda has been approved as well. We will now move on to our presentations, and it's with great pleasure that I will note that we have the 7th and 8th graders of the ALE program here at the school district come to join us. Dr. Moshe, I'll turn it over to you to turn it over to them.
I'm going to call Susie Richards up. Part of tonight's presentation is for our students, and part of it is a requirement to meet the ALE guidelines. So Mrs. Richards.
Christy, if you don't mind putting up that PowerPoint, that would be great. I'm just really honored to be here tonight. In addition to being principal of our kindergarten through fourth grade school, I also have the honor of being the principal of our new Alternative Learning Experience program, our ALE. And part of that requirement through the state of Washington is that we do engage in a board presentation each year. So I'm going to talk really quick because who you really want to hear from are the students in the program. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So just really quickly, when we went remote because of COVID, many families really struggled with their children being on the computer so much. And they came to us and said, are there any alternatives that we could look at? And we developed something very quickly, thanks to our amazing teachers, called the Parent Partnership Program, or SWAP. And that program partnered up parents and a mentor teacher for each grade level, who helped the families navigate remote learning without it being so dependent upon the internet and Chromebooks. And that program was very successful. And parents said, how do we keep some alternative options going? And we explored the Washington State Alternative Learning Experience, or ALE program. We launched into that. Our school board and superintendent were very supportive of that process. And we launched in the fall, and here we are with over 70 families involved in the program. So we could not be happier to see how we've met that need, and to have parents truly as partners. They are the primary folks responsible for the education of their children, with support from our mentor teachers. Next slide, please. Why alternative learning? Well, as I say, many families want alternatives, right? Some children don't learn best at a 5-day-a-week program where they're at a desk, and they need other ways, other means of learning. And parents want a voice in that education as well. And so we're going to kind of talk through tonight some of the programs, and you're going to hear directly from the students about our program. Next slide, please. Really honored to introduce our team. Andrea Mitchell, if you don't mind saying hello. Andrea is our 3rd through 5th grade ALE certificated mentor teacher. Andrew Firsch is our 1st and 2nd grade and 6th through 8th grade. Lisa Coyce is a community partner who we have contracted with. She has helping us with our compliance. There's a lot of paperwork and a lot of compliance with the state that we need to go through, reporting, and she has helped us navigate that. Kimmy Johnson is our administrative assistant. Gail Lavasser and the team at the community center. Many of our classes are held at the South Woodby Community Center, and they have been really instrumental in this program. Community partner instructors, really a big part of this program is about connecting our children with their community. So they have an opportunity to really feel like citizens and members of their local community. Of course, our families, couldn't do it without our families. They are a key partner in this process. And of course, most importantly, is our students, who you're going to get to hear from tonight. Next slide, please. Again, community partners are at the heart of this work, and this is just a brief list of the many people. Part of our program meets down at the Organic Farm School on Maxwell Road, on and on and on, from the City of Langley, the Veterans Resource Center. So many folks. Readiness to Learn, have the Historical Society. So many organizations and individuals have supported this work. Next slide, please. One of the things that we're asked to discuss at this annual report is our alignment between our district mission and goal. And I just want to point out that really where that huge alignment comes in is this idea of our students becoming active community members, and that learning happens in collaboration with our community. Next slide, please. Again, alignment, we're asked to discuss alignment between our district goals and objectives. And I think you can see for yourselves right there that our ALA students are provided these learning opportunities that align with those goals, with a focus on partnership with our families to assure growth and mastery in all content areas. Next slide, please. Dan is going to help me with this because I don't speak this language like Dan does. So if you don't mind, Dan.
We need to get the mic because there are folks online. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start again. So basically, when we talk about these numbers, 73.17, that's a student FTE. So if you're a full-time student in the program, we get funding at a 1.0 ratio from OSPI. If you attend half-time, it'd be a 0.5. So basically, we're looking at the head count, so there's 73.17 students, and we don't have somebody that's only this big, it is an average over a year. So that's why you see a 0.17 on the end. And then the full-time equivalency is what I was talking about, is that's really the amount of time that's spent in the program. So if you're there, is it 27 hours a week? 27.5 hours a week, you would be a full 1.0 FTE, and that is for funding purposes.
Said that much better than I could have. Next slide, please. The other thing that we're asked to discuss is the ratio of certificated teachers to students. Again, this number represents all students that each of our 2 certificated mentor teachers support. That does not mean those students are necessarily in class together as 30 students. Some of those students are learning completely from home with just support. Some are taking 1 class a week, some are taking 4. So that's the average number. Next slide, please. Just a couple quotes that I love so much. I'm just going to read one from each slide. We divide our students into grade bands. 1st and 2nd is 1 grade band, 3rd through 5th, and 6th through 8th. This is our 1st and 2nd grade ALE students. We do a lot of outdoor learning and a lot of hands-on learning. And I love this quote. I like having class out in nature and learning to understand the forest. Next slide, please. Our 3rd through 5th grade students. I love that. I love all these quotes, but the ALE program is my safe place. I can't even explain all the good things about the program. I have a lot of say. When I'm blue, I come to the farm school and the sun is yellow and the sun shines on the program. Next slide, please. This is our 6th through 8th grade program. And really, you see that community connection, especially seeing that come through. All of the projects include bettering yourself and your community. And that's what I love. Sometimes we expect our students to go out into the world at 18 and understand what it means to be a citizen of their community. They need time to practice that, what it means to be a citizen, and they have that opportunity in this program. Next slide, please. And again, just some wonderful quotes from our students: teamwork, connection, collaboration. Next slide, please. We plan to continue to offer our program next year. We will not be expanding to high school, but our 8th grade students are encouraged to reach out to Mr. Patton. Mr. Patton, can you raise your hand back there? Our high school principal, and he will work with our 8th grade families to help them develop a program that works for their student. And we'll be starting registration for next year soon. Next slide, please. We were just awarded a grant thanks to the efforts of Mr. Fursch from the state of Washington. It was called the Reimagine Education Grant, and that grant is going to be supporting additional partnership and connection with our community. So congratulations on that grant. I know it's going to be put to wonderful use. Next slide, please. I'm really excited now. I hope I talked fast enough to introduce our students, and we're going to start with one of our awesome 2nd grade student, River Stewart. Come on up, River, and Mr. Fursch is going to come up too.
Introducing River Stewart, an absolutely wonderful person who is going to share with you some of the work that the 1st and 2nd grade has been doing in the ALE program. It might make sense, River, to have you kind of come over here with me, just because this is unwieldy and large. So here you go, and you can face these folks because that's where we'll be.
Hi. So first I'm gonna say my name is River Stewart, and I am in 2nd grade in ALE program. And some of the things that I love about this school is that, well, the teachers are really nice, and I like that, and they're smart, and I like that they like nature so much, because living on a farm, you have to have a school that kind of likes nature. So that's pretty a good match. And some of the things we've been working on are our Scarlet runner beans, and we've been watching the life cycle, and we've had 2 times we've been working on them. The first one was not successful because they didn't have enough sunlight and nutrients. And the second one are already in our pots. So this one is going better. And then we have our rain garden that we are slowly getting the top layer of grass out to start digging down our hole for our rain garden. And we also have our ALE garden with the vegetables that we are slowly weeding through, and the Count of Gerald the worms are somewhere in the 40s or 70s anyways. And another thing I like about this school is that we also get to have our home projects. Like at home, I made my own knitting sticks and I dyed my own yarn. So we're gonna start knitting our own sweaters and stuff. Anyways.
Up next, Andrea Mitchell, 3rd through 5th grade.
Hello, I'm Andrea Mitchell. I work mostly with the 3rd through 5th grade, sometimes with 1st and 2nd, and I just can't tell you how thrilled I am to be working with this program. It's been wonderful, but enough from me. I would like to bring up, there's more students than are on this screen have decided to come. It's just been an outpouring from 3rd through 5th. So I'd like to invite up Layla, Trevor, Teddy, Evan, Kaya. Sean, do you want to stand up here with us? You don't have to say anything. Okay. All right. So we're going to go right out here and we'll just slide right up. They're each gonna, you're gonna stand here. Guys, stand right down here. You can stand right down here and you're gonna face these people. These are who you're talking to. Hey, Teddy. Awesome. So each student is going to just speak for about 30 seconds about their favorite highlights from ALE. We're just going to go right down the line.
What I like about the ALE is like really good. And right now I'm going to talk about the dance. So right now we're doing like a water dance, the states of water. So I'm ice, my friends are liquid, and my other friends are steam. And backyard, I learned how to do pullovers and we do games and a lot of stuff. Now, Spanish, we know a lot of new words and we're learning more. And in Expedition, we do science and poetry.
At the organic farm school, we're working on the bee houses that are gonna go, I think, like at the front of the like the track, that in the middle of it there holds all the vegetables and plants. Hi, I'm Layla and I'm in 4th grade. And I'm also talking about the bee boxes. And so Andrea got a bunch of supplies and she brought them to the farm school. And then we made these. And then Andy took us so that we could find materials for them. So like blackberry stems and cattail stems and stuff like that. And then also some cattail fluff and dry moss and stuff like that. And we're gonna put that in the shelves in here. And then what's beneficial about making these is that it's gonna help pollinate all of the vegetables and fruits in the farm school. And they're gonna come back and lay their eggs in here. So yeah. I like backyard and math tutoring on Mondays and Tuesdays. And I also like Spanish class. And during the expedition, I like going to the stream and collecting data and math games on Fridays.
Well, well, one thing that is really amazing about this program is that you can choose what you want to learn, which yeah, like you could choose if you wanted to do math, you could do like you could take a few math classes, and then if you wanted to do like some active classes, you could do that too. And another thing is that like the variety of classes, there's so many different classes you can take and so many different like things in those classes. And yeah, it's awesome.
Thank you, 3rd through 5th students. Handing it back to Andrew.
For the 6th through 8th grade, there will be 2 short presentations. The first one by Corin, who is going to talk about the ALE experience as a whole. And the second one from Atiana, Carmen, and Lil, who are going to specifically talk about their experience in Future City, which is an engineering and design program that they took part in. And to, without further ado, here's Corin.
Thank you. My name is Corin Boyd. I am an 8th grader at the ALE program. And I'm going to be talking about just the whole program. For me, this program has it's helped me in particular because I can teach myself, kind of. I mean, I get top, yeah. It helps me learn at my own pace. And that's been really helpful for me because before I never really got much help with that kind of learning. And shoot, I lost my place. And another thing, I've enjoyed acting my whole life, and at ALE we've been kind of creating our own small movies, which include like writing the script, acting, directing, filming, editing, costuming, all that stuff. And I've never been able to do that before, and I'm very glad that I got to do that here. We've also been working on creating, we've been working on trying to create like bike lanes for just around North Whitby, and I really enjoy that because I've been a biker or a cyclist, I guess, for 3-4 years now, something like that. And I've always wanted better bike lanes because before I've always had to bike on the road. And sometimes that can be kind of scary when cars go too fast. And we've also learned, one just major thing we've learned throughout the entire program is that we can affect the entire community instead of just ourselves in how much we have learned. And I just find that it's cool that somebody even my age can affect an entire community in that way. I've also learned how to challenge myself in more ways than I thought possible. I found more challenges than ever before at ALE. And yeah, we've also, we were working on writing an ordinance, or we are working on writing an ordinance. I don't know as much as I wish I did because I have been spending most of my time on the bike lanes, but as much as I do know is we're trying to replace plastic packaging and like single-use objects with disposable, compostable ones. We've also been working on restoring the wetland area behind the school, and we have removed so far the blackberries and have started laying mulch and cardboard. And we are hoping to have about, I think, 25 trees planted as of next Saturday. And then the underlayer, right? Yeah, is going to be planted next September and October. Another project that I've been interested in is fixing up the courtyard area and creating compost bins around the community center. For that project, we have the bins and have designed them and painted them. We just need to find the proper sealant to keep the paint from running in the rain. So yeah. We've created a new fence around one of the bigger electricity box outside of the community center. That's wood instead of chain link, so it looks much better now. We have spent lots of time. We've recently been spending time writing essays, but before that, we would write comedy routines or like letters. And the comedy routines we actually performed in front of the class, and a few of us got to perform them in front of ALE parents and students. We have been reading a lot of stuff for history. We've read A Little History of the World by E.H. Gombrich and A Young People's History of the United States. And we are reading A Young People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. And both books I have enjoyed all very thoroughly. And just with this program, it's helped me realize how much impact I can have, even just at the age I am. And I really couldn't have asked for a better 8th grade educational experience, and especially not a better teacher. Thank you.
Well, that's not working. So, I am Carmen Serta.
Hi, I'm Lil Goldberg.
Hi, I'm Matiana Rutland, and we're from the ALE class of 6th through 8th graders.
Earlier this year, we entered a competition called Future City. It's a nationwide and annual. The theme this year was a waste-free city. So that's exactly what we wrote about. We learned about so many topics. We interviewed people such as gardeners, engineers, and an employee of a local business.
We have been doing this for the first 4 months of the year. Recently, we have finished and presented a model, essay, presentation, and Q&A.
The work we did was hard and challenged our brains. We have learned and evolved from doing this project. We'd love to be challenged again and have more teamwork opportunities that this project provides.
I'm going to be talking about the essay. I asked someone in our class about it, and this is what they had to say. It was a lot of work, but a great experience. And I agree. I really think it helps some people, including me, with teamwork skills, learning about deadlines, interviewing, and just doing your best in general.
I'm going to be talking about the presentation. The presentation part of the competition was stressful and difficult. It was filmed on various days and put together on a day it was due. The presenters were stressed and kept forgetting their lines. There were many challenges when editing. The lead editor was absent, which made it harder to put it together. Although the deadlines helped the class realize that they are real.
I'm going to be talking about the model. So this scale model has water waste treatment plants, a university, windmills, and stores. This eco-friendly environment contains many ways to of transportation like gondolas, boats, zip lines, trains, and bikes.
The presentation was basically just an essay but in a script form and performed by the people from the town of Siam. The script was collaboratively written by the people who performed it. The video was made to describe the model and show how it was built.
There are buoys that transform the energy of water waves and convert them into electrical energy. This model was hard to make with the time we had and the limited supplies we were given, but we pushed through and gave it our best.
With all we did, we were the highest ranked first-year team and made it into the top 5 in the state. We have all worked very hard on this project and we would like to do it again.
Thank you for listening, and thank you, Andrew.
Thank you to all of the speakers, all of the students who came and shared their experiences with us. It's so phenomenal to get to hear from the people who are doing the learning about the learning. And it's just always wonderful to hear that authentic, direct student voice. It really helps. I'm not going to speak for everyone else, but it really helps me center my thinking on the student experience so that every decision that I partake in up here can be centered on that. Any other board members wanted to?
I just want to restate gratitude for the students who spoke today. And it's so energizing to feel the excitement and to see the impact of this opportunity in the lives of our students. Thank you. Thank you, students and parents and teachers, for being here this evening.
I'd like to first acknowledge a bias. I have a student in ALE, but even setting that aside, I'm really proud of everybody who came and presented. I know it can be intimidating to be in front of this board presenting. I was doing that myself not too long ago, and I am very encouraged to work with Dr. Moshe and Susie on other ways we can expand, not just ALE, but other alternative ways to teach our students, to meet them where they are. In ways like this. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. The opportunities that this program is presenting are going beyond what I had hoped for when we approved it. It's just been phenomenal. The emphasis on engaging with the community is amazing. The hands-on learning, what when you get to high school would be called career and technical education, with building things and working in the gardens and all of that, the engagement with local governments, all of that is just phenomenal to see. I think that, in my opinion, at least, this is the best thing that's come out of the school district from the pandemic. It's just been amazing to see this grow out of SWAP.
I would just like to thank all the students that came up and shared today. It was really great hearing about different parts of the program and, certain areas some enjoy and certain areas others enjoy, and kind of finding what's special for you, and also hearing how community centered it is. That was really great to hear. Thank you.
I'm just excited to hear directly from students about what they're learning, about what they like to learn, and their experiences. And I think it shows why we want to have student-centered representation and learning, and how important that is.
All right, we would also like to recognize some other folks. Dr. Moshe, you want to take this away?
So all year long, we recognize all of our staff that work with our students and help support the district. This last week in particular is there was a proclamation by the governor recognizing education support professionals. And that in our district means all of our bus drivers and custodians and paraeducators and secretaries and anyone else who supports our school district and our students. So I would just like the board to take a moment out of its deliberations to recognize our support professionals. They were certainly recognized over the course of last week with many treats that were provided for them every day. and lots of thank yous. But I think it's important as superintendent and the board that we take the time to recognize them officially.
Yes, these folks are some of the least recognized folks in the district who do some of the hardest work. Everyone always talks about teachers, and teachers are wonderful. I should know I married one. But the people who keep the schools working and running and on track are the exact people that we're talking about here. And it's just fantastic to have the opportunity to call them out and praise their work some here in public on the record. And I don't know what the district or the board would do without the folks who support us and the district as a whole. So thank you all.
I think, yes, thank you. Yes. I think another thing we all learned from the pandemic, besides, how much schools need community and how much our communities need schools, is how important school structure and infrastructure is to most kiddos' daily experience. And the folks we're talking about now are the folks who feed our kids and make sure our kids have warm coats and make sure our kids are getting the instruction that they need outside the hours with the teacher. And they're driving school buses and they're keeping things clean, which we all know is one of the most important aspects of our life now. And so one of the things I just read in this proclamation is that 62,000 people do that work every day in Washington. And that is an outstanding number of humans who have given their time and their energy and their talents to service to kids in our communities. And that feels really powerful to me.
I would just like to lean in and say thank you. I am still close with some of the paraeducators that I worked with throughout my career, and the partnership between a teacher and a para is truly that. It is a partnership. And while one may be certificated and one may be classified, when you walk into a classroom, there is no difference. And thank you to those paraeducators who show up in our buildings and work with our students and support all of our students throughout the day. Your work is acknowledged and your work is very deeply respected.
Thank you so much to everybody who's in this category of often forgotten behind the scenes. Whenever I see a school bus driving safely or a clean room like this in the district, I'm just still learning how much it takes behind the scenes to keep a district running so well like this. So thank you to everybody who's making that happen.
All right, we'll move on to public comment. Mrs. Macaro, do we have anyone signed up in person? 3 folks. We'll start with them. If you are online and would like to make a public comment, please use the Q&A function and just note down your name and location, and that will let us know that you have something you want to say. And then we can get to you after we get to those who are in person. Who's first on the list? Thank you, Dr. Moshe. Each speaker has 5 minutes, as per our usual.
Never before in the history of Washington has your job been so difficult. We extend our gratitude for your service. Since the National School Board Association has attempted to weaponize the FBI against concerned parents, we are unfortunately compelled to state this disclaimer. This letter and the enclosed documents are in no way meant to cause you to feel threatened in any way. We hope that you see these documents as an opportunity to receive support. The enclosed public disclosure requests have been served to all directors of the South Whidbey School District. Many districts across the state, including Seattle School District and several more throughout King County, will be or already have been served the same documents over the last 30 days by thousands of parents statewide who've come together as a unified voice. To ensure that this effort is recognized as a demonstration of support, The Island County Sheriff has also been given a copy of these documents and informed of our peaceful intent. We recognize there is a fundamental conflict of interest between school government and parents. School government has a vested interest in the system as a whole, while parents have a vested interest in the children. We have identified that the source of this conflict may stem from the fact that our local school boards have been forced to give away increasingly more decision-making authority to the Washington State School Directors Association, WASDA, and other state agencies. The superintendent of public instruction, Chris Reichdel, has clearly threatened to withhold taxpayer funds that rightfully belong to our school district based on whether or not we comply with health policies we may or may not agree with. Nowhere in the revised code of Washington is power granted to Mr. Reichdel or the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, OSPI, to withhold or bribe with the funds they are tasked to dispense to local school districts. Is it possible that Mr. Reichdel indicates or acts on the threat of withholding funds that this would imply extortion on his part? We the people founded this country with the structure that was designed to keep the greatest authority at the local level of government. Yet our governor and state agencies have made unilateral decisions for the whole population while ignoring the voices of the local school boards and parents. Perhaps we lost sight of that original vision of strong local authority when we let state and federal agencies like WASDA, OSPI, and the National School Board Association gain enough control to withhold our state funding over matters that should be a personal medical choice for every citizen. All of us share the responsibility of getting ourselves into this dangerous predicament of a few people dictating to the masses. We also share the responsibility of getting ourselves out of the predicament. There is a solution and a path forward. The documents enclosed are our first act of helping you, our local school board, take back your rightful authority to determine how best to represent the parents of this district. Please use these public disclosure requests as an opportunity to educate yourselves and us so we can better understand the entanglement we find ourselves in with OSPI, WASDA, and other state agencies who are overstepping their lawful boundaries. According to RCW 28A.345.020, all Washington state school boards are required to be members of WASDA. Most states do not have laws that compel membership. Their school boards still have the authority to choose whether or not they want to take guidance from various state agencies, but not here in Washington. In RCW 28A.343.100, school board members are again compelled by law, starting in 2022, to take governance training in cultural competency, diversity, equity, and inclusion standards. Those are words for critical race theory, sexual education for children as young as 5 years of age, and curriculums that promote transgenderism. There are just two examples of how our state legislature has taken away your authority to choose what you're taught and what you will be compelled to promote to our children. Representative Joel McIntyre attempted to introduce a bill in the previous legislative session that ended on March 10th that proposed that local school board membership in WASDA be optional rather than mandatory. Making membership optional would return decision-making authority back to the local level and send a clear message to WASDA that we erroneously let power become too centralized. WASDA has been treating Washington.
Thank you for your comment. I know that we do have a printed copy in here, so we can read it in full at our leisure. Again, thank you for sharing that comment. I will note that the diversity, equity, and inclusion is not critical race theory, and that sexual education is not taught to 5-year-olds in this district or required to be taught by state law. Who's next on the line?
I'm going to continue reading the letter. Making membership optional would return decision-making back to the local level and send them, did we read that one up? Sorry. We, the parents of Washington, finally comprehend how little authority you have left to represent us. It's time we come together to restore your authority and ours. In addition to providing the information requested in these documents, we ask that the Southerby School Board do all of the following. Number one, reach out to Representative Joel McIntyre to give him your support of the bill that proposed WASDA membership to be optional. Whether it's this year or next year, that bill must get passed for the future of our children. Strongly urge WASDA to withdraw membership from the NSBA. Currently, almost 20 other states have left the NSBA, and Washington parents are very disappointed, and citizens, to see WASDA's silence on the matter. Number 3, pass a resolution acknowledging and affirming that parents are the primary stakeholders in their children's future. Several other districts in Washington have passed this resolution. As we finish the 2021-22 school year, we envision a harmonious partnership between parents, school district leadership, and legislators to restore the freedom of personal choice over what our teachers and students wear on their faces and put in their bodies, as well as restore authority to the local level of government. However, if these freedoms are ignored by the South Whidbey School Board, we will take our children out of the public school system by the fall of 2022. As you are all well aware, over 55,000 children have been withdrawn from the Washington State public school system over this year, and that number will more than likely triple if mask mandates are re-implemented and a COVID vaccine is made a requirement of attendance. As a body of parents and citizens across Washington State, we have heard your collective plea for cooperation and help. You've been sincerely telling us your hands are tied by WASDA and OSPI. We understand you now. So together, let's untie your hands and restore your authority to represent us, the parents and citizens of South Whidbey School District. And this is signed by citizens of most of South Whidbey here, and you have copies.
Thank you for finishing reading that. Next on the list.
Hello, I'm Jake Stewart, proud father of the 7-year-old that articulately stood up here and did a great job, and that entire class. I first just want to take a second to thank you all for the service you have done voluntarily as our neighbors and friends over this really difficult time. And a loud majority of us support what you've done and appreciate it. And while some may spin in anxiety and projection and whatever, we're moving on. And this ALE program represents the type of positive things that are going on. And I think it's appropriate to have that kind of joy and light in here for you all. The program, when this pandemic thing started, I remember had a chance to talk to the superintendent, and everybody's just, what do we do? And some institutions are hunkering down and locking into the status quo. And I remember her saying, it's a time to think outside the box and look at everything. And that was one of the, as far as I know, one of the first conversations that then spun into SWAP and ALE. And of course, wonderful Susie Richards ran with the ball like a champion and has hired the right people. Imagine what the second year looks like. This would be considered a pilot, and it's wonderful, and the results speak for themselves. And that's what I think a lot of us are here to speak to, is at a time where a lot of things are moving and changing, being adaptable and offering different alternatives. I think this could prove to be a big part of the future of public education, in my personal opinion. I think this type of engagement with community is not only creates a dynamic education where you're feeding the talents of each individual, but it's also a good bargain for the district. If you're just someone who's fiscally looking at numbers, because you're relieving by parent partnerships and drawing in the community, you're relieving institutional load on some of these services. So either way you look at it, it's a great deal. And I think that it's a great thing to hopefully double down on and expand and continue to be path break. This is a path breaking area. And I expect that there'll be phone calls. How do you do this? What do we do? And so engage that, fly it high, and thank you again for your service.
Thank you for sharing those comments.
Just added myself on there at the last minute to say everything that he just said. So I'm a proud parent of 3 ALE students. So I think we're kind of winning in the department of who's got the most. Carmen is my daughter who spoke earlier. And I just want to reiterate what Mr. Stewart said in every regard. He just basically recapped what I was thinking. Really grateful, very grateful for Andrew and Andrea and Shelby and Kimmy. Oh my gosh, talk about support staff. She's been life-saving, and all the administrators too, who've been really supporting our family particularly. This program has represented our ability to make choice, which is what a lot of people are really fighting for right now, but also to remain supportive of this district and be a part of the system, which we believe deeply in. So I just wanted to say thank you. And it's working very well for our family, and I hope we can keep it up and expand it. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing those comments. Do we have anyone else? And we don't have anyone who's popped into the Q&A. So I believe that's everything for public comment. Thank you all very much. I find the opportunity to hear directly from the community very, very informative and very critical to what we do. So thank you all for participating and joining us and telling us what you think. We'll move on to new business. First item of business is Memorandum 2122-37, approval of new policy 3411, accommodating students with seizure disorders or epilepsy. Is there any discussion we had, or Andrea, would you like to go over it?
We are just making some changes in terms of language, and so no further discussion beyond what we had at the workshop.
Any other comments or questions to be had on this? Okay. All those in favor of approving new policy 3411, accommodating students with seizure disorders or epilepsy, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. The alterations to policy, or the inclusion of policy 3411, accommodating students with seizure disorders or epilepsy, has been approved. Next up, Memorandum 2122-38, approval of renumbering policy 3411 to 3409, head lice. This is just a simple, the new policy came in with a set number, and to avoid confusion, we moved another one. Any comments or discussion on this one? All those in favor of approving the renumbering of former policy 3411 to 3409, head lice, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The renumbering of policy 3411 to 3409 has been approved. Next up, Memorandum 2122-39, approval of new policy 5004, infection control program. Do we have anything to comment or discuss on that one?
I have a potential amendment I would like to raise. Hopefully I'm doing this in turn.
Yep.
I noticed there's an exemption for staff members born before a certain date that they are assumed immune to measles. I would like to amend this to add an equivalent exemption for staff members born prior to January 1st, 1980, which is the CDC guideline, need not provide evidence of immunity to chickenpox, varicella. It's assumed by the CDC that individuals born before that date will have immunity due to the fact that it was endemic in our society, and everyone of that age or older will have had it. And so they shouldn't need to prove immunity.
So I believe if we want to move forward with that amendment, we would have to run that through legal to ensure that it meets the requirements for policy.
Yeah, I would suggest you make the amendment and let me take it back and bring it back to you.
Okay, if that's the proper procedure for an amendment that needs a legal review, then yes, let's do that.
Because that's adding something substantive that we just want to, we absolutely trust the information you're coming with, but we want to make sure that legal dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's.
I believe, so for our audience at home, Christy was asking a clarification around the language. So Director Green-Heron, if you want to clarify the language you're suggesting to amend.
Certainly. I'll just say it verbatim. So after the semicolon measles, staff members born prior to January 1st, 1980 need not provide evidence of immunity to varicella chickenpox.
And then another semicolon, I presume.
And then another semicolon. Thank you.
Since we are a small board under Robert's rules, we do not need a second for this. Is there any discussion to be had on the amendment?
I appreciate the recommendation to review this with legal, and I share your assumption, Director Green-Heron, that this would be a valuable addition.
Okay. Any other discussion to be had on this or questions? Okay. All the,
One more question. I noticed there's one infectious disease that has a safe, effective, and widely available vaccine that's not on this list. I'm speaking of COVID-19. So I would also like to provide a provide a similar amendment, obviously with the approval of the legal committee and any other bars that need to cross, to add that to the list of infectious diseases as well.
and to be clear, this is a list of recommended immunizations. It is not a list of required immunizations.
Correct. Recommended only.
Any comments or discussion on that?
I will, we will make the amendments, run it past council and bring it back to you at the next business meeting.
So we have two amendments on the table. So we'll vote on those two amendments.
I don't believe you have to vote on them because you are, you're still in the modification stages. Remember, it's 3 readings is potentially what you can do. So you did a reading at the workshop and you just used tonight as a second reading, and then we'll come back. There's no need for board action.
Okay. So we have two amendments that have been suggested. We'll run them by legal and we'll bring this this policy up for voting at the next business meeting then. We can't take action at workshops.
No, I would recommend that we bring it back for a workshop to discuss as a policy, as a group, before bringing it to a business meeting.
I think that's a fantastic suggestion, yes.
And thanks for your help with the procedural things as I learn how to do these.
Okay, so that one will be set aside until the next 2 meetings, the workshop and the business meeting.
Could we also ask some of our nurse partners to join us at that workshop? Okay.
Okay, next on the new business item list, a memorandum 2122-40, approval of 2022 staff computer refresh. Dr. Moshe, if you'd like to address this one.
Yes, we are a district that has continually upgraded technology, and the last staff refresh was 2016. So those computers are needing to be upgraded. So we are a staff that is small enough that we upgrade everyone all at once, including the board. So that's what this proposal is for. It is anticipated expense out of our capital project fund.
Any comments or discussion from the board on this item?
I just want to express my general discontent with planned obsolescence and this modern age, but I do appreciate that a computer's lifespan is generally shorter than 6 years, and it's about time for our staff to have what they need to continue doing their work. Thank you.
Yeah, that actually came up from a number of people during the discussions I had with staff during my school visits, that some of their computers were getting a little slow, getting a little cranky.
Marnie, I hope it brings you some comfort that the items are not thrown away. They are surplused and sold for other uses.
That is good news. I hope that whoever has to use them next has better luck.
Anything from other board members or student board members?
What would be the cost?
The cost as listed here is $251,128.96 as the basic plus tax and contingency, bringing it to a total authorization requested of $332,977.18. So it is and that's what, give or take, you mentioned, which is what the $60,000 contingency there is there for. Yeah.
I was just reacting to the 18 cents. We're very precise.
And knowing that this is a planned thing, that this isn't spur of the moment, that this isn't anything like that, I'm fully in favor of all the plans that both Mr. Turner and Mr. Leuenberger make to upgrade our infrastructure, both physical and technological.
I have one question. Hopefully, Dr. Moshe, you can speak to this. I noticed that some individuals have different options selected. Is that based on their preference or on some other decision-making process?
Can you scroll down, Christy, for me? Yeah, it's typically, there may be a specialized need. For example, we work with the elementary program, so there may be the need for iPads, there may be the need for a particular style. What we have done is streamlined what we will support, and this falls within those parameters. In the past, it used to be one could order whatever one chose to have, and it was impossible to manage, but we have streamlined that. And so these are all within the parameters of what we support.
Great, thank you.
Not seeing anything else. So all those in favor of approving the 2022 staff computer refresh, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. The 2022 staff computer refresh has been approved. The last item on our new business is Memorandum 2122-41, appointment of board member as WIAA representative. Director Green Director Green had this role previously, and with his resignation, we have the opening. This came obviously since it was Director Green's position before Director Greenherron was on the board. So we will go through this and do a roll call vote as we do for every other position on the board, but we are open to nominations first.
For the sake of our community knowing what the acronym means, would you be able to state what a WIAA representative does?
Yeah, the WIAA representative interfaces with our athletic directors and works with athletics and the schools.
Thank you. I know that one of those A's stands for athletics, but I can't recall what the I stands for.
Washington Interscholastic Athletics Association?
That's right. Thank you.
Well, you asking that question gave me the time to rack my brain and remember.
Activities.
Activities, thank you.
It's more than just athletics.
Thank you. That is a very important point as well. So we are open for nominations for the post of WIAA representative. Are there any?
Can I ask a question first? Do any of our sitting school board directors who are able to serve in these roles have any interest in that role, given that it is more than just athletics, but would also include activities, clubs, all of the things?
Just in terms of clarity, the position involves being a liaison. So I'm not sure that you don't have to go to every activity or sporting event in order to be the WIAA rep. Just didn't want to scare anyone away.
No, you attend some meetings and then you tell the board what happened at the meeting.
So I've spoken with our athletic director about the position, and since I'm assuming the role that the board seat that the predecessor of mine had, that I would love to put my name forth. It seems like an interesting way to learn more about our student athletes and the hard work they do both on and off the field.
Thank you. And this gets into rules and regulations, so I have to ask 2 more times. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? We have 1 nomination. We'll go through and do a roll call vote. And we start from the newest member. So we'll go directly to Director Greenherron. How do you vote for the Oh, wait, thank you, Saul, for the reminder. Let's get some advisory votes from our student representative, our student board members. Thank you very much for the reminder.
I vote for Joe Greenherron for the WIA representative.
Joe Greenherron.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you for the reminder. So Director Greenherron, how do you vote?
I vote for Director Greenherron.
Okay. Director Jackson, how do you vote?
I vote for Joe Greenherron.
Director Johnson,
I vote for Joe Greenherron.
Director
I vote
Downs.
for Director Greenherron.
I also vote for Director Greenherron. Welcome to being our board representative to the WIA.
Thank you. I'm excited to learn more about sports and how our students are pushing themselves physically in addition to mentally.
All right, so that is all of our new business here. So we'll move on to reports and our financial and enrollment report from Mr. Pullman.
We did just get some kind of a brief warning that said a connection had been lost. So it might have to do with the room.
Good evening. We'll start with enrollment. And this is for our March enrollment report. Our enrollment in March was about 1166. So our annual September through March enrollment average is 1161.3. We had budgeted 1145, so we're slightly above that enrollment level. I do want to point out a couple things. If you look at the lower left corner, you'll see the red dotted line is our current enrollment. It had popped up during January and February, but now is looking like it's going to continue on a similar pattern that it has in the past. If that holds true, I expect that our annual enrollment through June will actually be about 1160. So that's what we're using as our basis for looking at enrollment for the coming year. On the lower right is the estimated enrollment compared to where we actually are. And the ones that are fairly different is 4th through 8th grade. Some are a little lower, some a little higher, but that's the biggest variations. And I encourage you, if you have questions or if I say things that you don't understand, to stop me, ask questions, because I'll try to be thoughtful in that situation, but I may not. We are halfway through our school year as of February 28th. We start on September 1st and run through August 31st for our fiscal year, which is a little longer than our typical school year. Year-to-date revenue is about 45% or almost $9.7 million. And the expenditure, which about 48% or about $10.7 million. So there's a discrepancy between our expenditures and our revenue. And if you look at the lower right-hand corner, you'll see that the bottom 2 lines are current year revenue and expenditures. A little larger variation there than we've seen in other years. A couple of reasons for that. The first is we have a lot more federal funds this year than we've had in the past because of CARE, COVID, all the things. And in federal funds, we spend the money and we claim it the following month. With state funding, we receive it in the current month. We don't have to spend it. And the other aspect is when we go to the budget sheet, we'll see that we actually budgeted to spend more expenditures than we had in revenue. We knew we were going to do that and we were going to use fund balance for the difference. Thing I want to point out here, left side is going to be our revenue. And you'll notice that on the local revenue, whether it's property taxes, local revenue generated in the school district, or anything based on enrollment, such as state funding, it's actually lower than it has been in prior years where the federal funds are a little higher. But what I would really want to point out is in the bottom left corner at the pattern of funding. You notice that the red dotted line is the current year, and it's actually below where we were 2 years ago as far as the total amount of money that we're receiving. So it paints that picture that our revenue is actually declining over time. On the right-hand side is expenditures. And you see the yellow dotted line is the current year, and you can see that it continues to rise. So we have that difference between revenue and expenditure that we are going to talk about when we get into the budget process. For the current year, with all our year-to-date expenditures and encumbrances, all those things that we have, contracts that we know we have to pay, things we have ordered but not actually received, et cetera, we're at about 90% of our budget. So we're still in good shape. And on the right-hand side just tells you in a big picture view how we spend our money. And you can see that 88% of that is salary and benefits, and about 12% is non-employee costs. Budget status report is just another look at revenue and program. And you can see on that revenue side, the roughly $7 million, the expenditures roughly 10.7. We started with about a $5.2 million fund balance, and it's currently at roughly $4.2 million. So we have used fund balance as we had planned on doing that throughout this year. And this is just a balance sheet, asset liabilities for each of our accounts. Tells you, what we're holding in assets, what we still owe to other things, and then what the balance is. And the very bottom just tells you what type of fund balance it is. Is it dedicated to the particular fund use, such as levy funds? Is it unrestricted, like general fund, et cetera? So it gives you a little bit of clue on how we can spend those dollars. And then we do have other funds, which we don't talk about a lot, but capital projects we have received through local property taxes, about $965,000. We spent about $917,000 of that on projects, which is technology and building improvements. The debt service fund is there to pay for a project we did several years ago, and I think we have about 3 years left on that loan, but it was energy retrofits to the district. We did a $1.8 million worth of work to make us more energy efficient. And we're paying that with the savings from that program. So it's one of those programs that was an upfront cost, but actually the savings in energy costs on an annual basis was more than what the payment is. ASB is
Dan,
our student body fund.
Just a moment.
Yes.
Just confirming an assumption that the staff computer purchase that we just approved is not included in this yet.
It is not included in this, but we have about a $2 million fund
Oh,
balance.
absolutely.
And then
Yeah.
we will have another levy collection in April and May.
I just wanted to make sure that my assumption was correct. I'm sure it's all been planned for as mentioned.
You will see nothing in financial statements that has not been approved in that type of a purchase from the board. Okay, it always happens after your approval that we create the purchase order. The student body fund, the ASB fund, is funds generated by the students, managed by the students. They have generated a little over $53,543. They've spent about $42,800 with a balance of $64,000, which is good because last year at this time, the fund balance was really quite low. And that was due to the pandemic and the lack of student activity predominantly. The transportation vehicle fund has $462. That's for purchasing large yellow school buses. You'll see we had an expenditure of $309,000, which was 2 large buses we bought this year. We will get a reimbursement from the state in August and then plan to purchase more school buses next year. So it's a fund where we get reimbursed on an annual basis for buying school buses to continually be able to do that. And the last one, there's about $8,000, and that was generous donations from the community to be used as scholarships for students. The revenue comes from interest at this point, and the expenditures are the scholarships as we get billed by the colleges or wherever the student might be going. Would like to spend a little bit of time talking about the budget. As you know, it's July 27th that we ask you to approve the budget. You will look at next year's budget from September of 2022 to August 31 of 2023, and then a 4-year budget projection. So we can kind of see where we're going and see if there's anything to worry about in the future. I do want to tell you that this is a working document, so that the numbers you see today may be different next week or the week after as we clarify, refine, change our expenditures, etc. So don't be surprised if you see different things at different times. Talk a little bit about what happened in the legislative session. So the Engrossed Substitute Senate Bill 5693 is what lays out all the parameters that school districts use to create their budgets. And there's things in there like the implicit price deflator. So you think about what's inflation, and this is one way they measure it. It was actually 2.8%, but the Senate had put 2.8% in their previous budget. The House was at 5.5%. And then they negotiate those two budgets and come out with one budget that is then sent to the governor. And is currently sitting on the governor's desk, hasn't been signed, but it will be. In that revision, the Senate decided that they would agree with the House and have a 5.5 IPD, or implicit price deflator, to make up for the cost of inflation in the previous year, plus some back years that they thought they may have underfunded it. It actually has two purposes in school budgets. The first is it's part of their allocation formula, and we'll talk about that, but it's how they increase the amount that is given to school districts on an annual basis. And the other part has to do with the expenditure side. Most of our contracts have a tie to IPD in how we increase salary schedules. And we'll talk about that a little bit and what that means. The second half of this is a consumer price index, is what we used to use traditionally before they had the IPD, another way of measuring inflation. It's set at 5%. And the important part of that for us is that it's used on a levy calculation. We are a district that has a very large assessed value in the community, about $6 billion worth of value. So we cannot use the method that is a rate per $100,000 or of assessed value. We have to use a per student pupil rate. So they take the enrollment, they multiply it by, and the current year number is $2,741 and some cents. And that is our levy lid. That is all we can ask for in our budget process. So even though the community says that we could collect 3.4 million, because that's what they approved in the coming year, you'll see in the budget document, it's going to be $3,300,000 and some $1,000, because we are limited by that rate of per pupil amount. So IPD, or Consumer Price Index, is important in that calculation. So it's really nice to see a larger number there, because it allows us to collect more than if it was a really low Consumer Price Index number. There's also lots and lots of data points in this document, and the document is about 880 pages long. So as you read through it, it sets retirement rates, it sets the health insurance benefit amount that's on a monthly basis through the state. And this is the amount that we pay for medical, and also the amount we get reimbursed for medical. It also increases funded salaries, and funded salaries are not the same as what we pay. But if IPD is 5.5%, it takes the previous year's salary in these classifications and increases it by that percentage. Then it establishes the ALE rate, such as the program that they had showed you tonight. How much do we get funded per student in a program like that? How much is reimbursed for Running Start, et cetera. And then the right side is what they call MSOCs. It's material, supplies, operating costs. So think of it as paper, lights, electricity, those type things. We get a rate per student. So for every student we have, we get roughly $1,438 to pay for those additional costs. We get a little extra at the high school level, and then there's a number for the CTE program that they get additionally. So these are some of the rates. There's a lot more things in the document, but this is what we use to create the revenue projections by putting these into a prototypical school model formula. The other thing that we have to talk about, and this is an important one for South Woodby, is something called regionalization. And I've been telling you about this for 4 years. Basically, there's a state allocation in all these classifications, and I'll show you what those are, that every district in the state gets. It's all the same. And then some districts receive regionalization. And South Woodby was one of a few that received a regionalization point of 24% in 18-19. So they basically take that state allocation, they add 24% on to that. Next year, that regionalization percentage becomes 18%. So it has gone down 2% every year, which has an effect on our bottom line, on our actual funding factors. And then the bottom part is, because we have a highly experienced staff, way above the state average, they've created another formula that says you can get an extra percentage or so based on that experience. And for us, we get an additional 4% on the staffing allocation model for certificated staffing. Has nothing to do with the staff themselves, it's just an allocation model. But these are the factors we use to determine how we calculate revenue.
Dan, so for Director Greenherron, who's new to our table, and for those listening at home, so for example, when you were talking about our expenditures and you talked about utilizing fund balance as we knew we would, you're referring to this table and to this decrease in the funding, because that funding started last year, but we had the pandemic with ESSER funding with an influx of federal funds. And so this year is kind of when we are starting to see that shift and that change between the original 24% allocation down to the 20% allocation. Correct?
I think that's a fair analysis, that those additional federal funds has actually postponed this process for a couple years, because we had planned on this situation several years ago, seeing that how it was set up. So that has slowed down the progression, I think, but didn't change the trajectory. It's still going the same place. So a little bit about funding in this particular state. And if we look at this, they use what they call a prototypical school funding model. And the purpose of that is for the legislature to provide support to the school districts in offering, and I find this interesting, the minimum instructional program. So that's why we still have a levy, is because this is just minimum funding. There's a lot of things in this system that is not funded or not fully funded. An example is, transportation is not fully funded, food service is not funded at all, and you can go down the road. So when we talk about this, I want to be clear that I'm talking about an allocation process. It's only a funding process. It has nothing to do with program. It has nothing to do with our staff. It is really just a model that is used to calculate how much money we should receive from the state based upon how many students we have. Okay. So there's kind of two big areas in this funding model. And the first is a per funded staff allocation. So they will calculate that. And for South Woodby, it's that same base allocation that across the state that is improved every year by IPD. And then there's regionalization, which for us has decreased from 24% to 18%.
Dan, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Why has regionalization decreased? What drives that change?
That was determined by the leaders in Olympia. They set up a regionalization factor that is different across the state. So you might be a district that receives no regionalization. And regionalization originally was in response to the cost of living. So the housing cost in certain areas is more than others. Okay, so in Eastern Washington, you probably aren't going to see as much regionalization because they looked at that when they created this, and they look at it every 5 years and said that the cost of living there was cheaper than it was in Bellevue. So we should give Bellevue more money than we give Ephrata. Okay, but it wasn't that simple. They created formulas where some people would get 12% and it'd be, for the first 5 years, or maybe it's 18%. There was a handful of districts, and it was very large districts such as Edmonds, Everett, Lake Stevens, those with,
But not Seattle.
but not Seattle, not Bellevue, not Mercer Island, not Lake Washington. That got 24% up front and then it declined over 18. So they created that schedule I just showed you. Okay. And unfortunately, South Woodby being a small district, sucked into that vortex of these large districts who have more capacity to absorb those things.
Mukilteo, 24% goes down like ours does. Bill, I think they started at 12 and stay at 12.
Something like that,
And
yeah.
same thing in Oak Harbor, they're just steady. For those 6 districts that Dan mentioned, it's 24%, 24%, then it drops 20, 18, and eventually gets to the bottom. And so but the district has planned for that reduction over time. And again, as it was said, for the last 2 years, it was mitigated, but we're still going to have to do it. We have to adjust to that reduction.
And I'll show you that as we go through this, what effect that really has on us. And the other part of this is the non-student, the MSOC, material, supplies, and other costs allocation, and that's a certain dollar amount per student. So those make up the basis of this. There's a lot of other pieces in here. There's specialized funding for other purposes, and there's other things, but that's kind of the general format of how this process works. So in this funding model, they look at 3 classifications of employees. And the first is certificated instructional staff. And that's basically, think of that as your teachers that have a certificate. And they may not be a teacher, they might be a counselor, but they have a certificate. Your classified staff, or your education support professionals, as I think is a better term for them, is going to be all those people that Joe talked about, whether it be a custodian, a paraeducator, a secretary, a bus driver, a food service person, et cetera. And then your certificated administrative staff, and that's building principals and basically superintendent and myself. So they have those 3 categories. Yeah, there's 7 of us. It's not a big group. And that's important because they fund them at different levels. And we'll look at what that is. And when I talk about FTE, it's full-time equivalent, and it's prevalent in this funding formula. So if we're talking about a student, if you attend 6 hours a day, 180-day school year, which is the typical day we have here, or 1,080 hours, that's a full 1.0, and we get funding based on that 1.0. If you're at the high school and you only attend 2 classes a day, you're a 0.5, okay, that type of thing. And they do the same thing with staff. The only thing that's really kind of different is we talk about our classified staff. It's based on a 2,080 hour year. So a custodian who works 8 hours a day, 260 days a year is actually a 1.0, but a paraeducator who works 6 hours a day, 192-day year is only a 0.55. So there's these variations in there. And you see that when you start looking at a few things in this process. So here's our funding allocation. I'll start with our certificated instructional staff. On the top, you'll see the years and then the IPD. So in 2021, we had a 1.6 IPD, and this was an allocation from the state. And we had our basic state allocation of $67,585. Regionalization at that point was 22%, was another $14,869. The experience, 4% of the state allocation, came to $85,157, or $11 more than we received the year before, basically a 0.01% increase. Doesn't correlate to IPD because of the reduction in regionalization. Same thing next year. There's a 2% regionalization or 2% IPD reduction in regionalization. Again, we come up with an extra $325 or 0.38%. And then we move in the next year, that 5.5% IPD really becomes a 3.8% increase in the allocation, and that's just in the allocation formula. So when we talk about IPD, it doesn't necessarily correlate in our district because of that regionalization factor. We will be at 18% in 22-23. Right now, that regionalization is at 20%. So it has gone from 24 to 18% over time. So kind of a regressive funding model for school districts. We see the exact same thing with classified staff and administrators. A little worse though, because that experience doesn't add in that extra IPD increase on an annual basis, but a very similar concept as we look at those. And you'll see that they are funded at different levels so that, you know, classified staff is funded at one level, certificate at another, and administrators at a third level. So they all have different funding for different purposes. So how do we actually get our funding? Now we know how much they fund per staffing. Well, there's what they call the prototypical school model. And they basically look at the number of students you have, and they use this model, and it's really much larger than this. But it says, if you have 400 students in an elementary school, we will fund 1.25 FTE, and they refer to them as staffing units, not individuals or people or anything like that, of administrative staff. So they take that 1.253, they multiply it by the dollar amount that was on the previous pages, they come up with a dollar amount. They do the same thing with certificated instructional staff, say guidance counselor. So an elementary school would have a 0.5 funding for a guidance counselor. And these numbers will increase a little bit in the coming year because there is a change in the Senate bill that increases both health services and guidance counselors slightly. Not dramatically, but you can see, you know, if you look at health services, that's your school nurse. They fund basically 0.135 of a person to be here on a, you know, on a daily basis. So totally underfunded when we talk about things that are not funded fully or not funded at all. And then, you know, a custodian, office support, classified instructional assistants, all examples of our classified staffing. So they all have a different funding amount that goes with those. Anyways, there's 80 pages of these calculations that determines, based on students, how many staffing units times those dollar amounts, they add benefits on it, and that becomes our revenue. Again, allocation purposes only, does not match our salary schedules. We don't receive funding for every district employee. If you look at that funding model, you'll see that there's a lot of those categories that are totally unfunded. Elementary school, they basically funded 0.936 of a paraeducator, you know, that type of thing. So, and the last thing is that it's, you know, it's a funded staffing level that's based on enrollment and this model. So it's only a funding model. So when we talk about that, that's what we're talking about. Then we start looking at, okay, now we know the kind of the basis of how we build the budget. Where are we going with it? Well, here's our current enrollment by building. And it's important that we do it by building and by grade because this helps us when we look at our staffing needs. We look at how many students we have, we look at the needs of those students, the programs they need, and we can start looking at what that is. You'll see that we have in what I call BEA, which is our in-person students that come to the building, roughly 1,089 FTE, another roughly 73 in the ALE program for 1,162. So that's our funded FTE that we get paid on. Again, BEA gets paid at a different rate than ALE, so we have to do those separately. This is what we're looking at for next year. So if we can go through a million of the different enrollment models, but I'll show you a simple way of how we came to this. But we're looking at the BEA or the in-person students at roughly 1,035, the ALE at roughly 68.5. So we go from 1162 to 1104.
And Dan, just a reminder that we intentionally try to under project for the allocation adjustments.
Lightly.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, you never want to go over, and there's a reason. And I don't know if I've explained this before, but we get funded for the first 4 months based on our estimate. And then in January through June, they readjust based upon actual. So if we project 100 more kids, they're going to fund us for those 100 extra kids 4 months, and then they're going to take it away for the rest of the year because we didn't actually have those students. So we want to be as close as possible to where we think we'll be without going over. But here's an easy way of looking at that. You know, currently we have the 1166. Well, we have 96 seniors. We have kindergarten and first grade currently of about 56 students. If we have 56 next year, which would match the last 2 years, there's 40 less students. We also have students that when they become juniors, they go into Running Start. When they go into Running Start, they no longer get district funding because the funding goes to the community college. And that's roughly 15 to 20 kids a year. So if we add the 40 and 15, we get 55 fewer students next year for that, just that easy comprehension of, they graduated, smaller class came in. So, we're looking at about a 58 difference, and that's an easy way of looking at those. So we start talking about our revenue. Students times that staffing ratio calculates the number of staffing units that are funded at a certain dollar amount. We add benefits, MSOCs, and that's where we create our revenue. So there's rates that come. So when we start looking at these programs, we can look at all that staffing formula and come down to one number that basically for every student that's in our basic education program, the district receives approximately $10,379. ALE is about $1,000 less, and the special education rate's about the same as BEA, $10,342. So for every student that we have, these are the dollar amounts that ties to them in kind of a bigger picture look without going through all the detail of how we get to it. Running Start, just so you know, is actually a flow through for the district. We receive the funding and we then pay the community college for the students that are going there. So it really doesn't matter what the rates are when we create a budget for that.
And Dan, just to clarify, the sped rate is an additional 10,000 up to 13.5% of the total district population. And so any student over the 13.5% is not funded any sped dollars.
That is true. So if we're running at 15, 16%, that extra percentage is not funded. The district is picking those dollars up basically through basic education.
Was that a hypothetical rate or is that our sped rate currently?
So every district in Washington State, only 13.5% of special education students are funded. Anything over 13.5% is not funded. And I believe the majority of districts are well over 13.5.
We're at about 15.
About 15, yeah.
And so things that can impact that would be like, for example, us being close to a naval base that's considered a Category 5 compassionate placement base means that the military prioritizes families with students with special needs to those bases, creating an influx of students requiring special education services that would impact our percentages and our numbers.
Thank you. As always, appreciate your deep knowledge of this.
He has much more knowledge about special education than I do. So here's an initial estimate on our revenue and a little comparison to historical numbers. The first one, the total local tax revenue, is an accurate number. That is the $2,741 times the number, or 1,104 student type thing that we expect to have. So we know that that's going to be really close. The local non-tax revenue goes up a little bit, and that is predominantly revenue from the community center. I'm fully anticipating that it's opening back up. We're going to start collecting full rent and all the things that go with that. Because if you go back to 1920, you'll see we're about $636,000 when things were actually really moving along well. The next two lines, which are the state funding, those are based upon enrollment. And you see that there's not much of a change in those. And I'll talk about that a little bit because it's like, wait a minute, you said there's an IPD change and how come there's not much change in that? And then the lower one is our federal dollar. You see that drops by $1 million. And I can explain that really simply is that we get roughly $875,000 a year in our typical special education, title programs, et cetera. Well, we got additional $2 million this year, which is a one-time grant, and we have 3 years to spend it. I anticipate we'll spend, and we budgeted the entire amount in case we spend it. I anticipate we'll spend about $1 million of that $2 million in the current year, which leaves $1 million to carry over in the coming year. So that's why you see the $1.9 million. $1 million of that is that CARES funding, and the other $900,000 is roughly our normal grants that we get on an annual basis. So we're actually looking at a very flat revenue picture. You'll see in 2021, the actual amount was, 20,287,000. If we subtract the million we're not going to spend from the federal dollars, we're about 20,440,000 and expecting 20,590,000. So just a very flat revenue picture for those years. And that's really has a lot to do with that regionalization. And here's why. So the first number, about 13 million, is our salary and benefits. And even though there's a 5.5% IPD, we're only going up 3.8 because of the drop in regionalization. That creates a $500,000 in revenue. And then the MSOCs get a 5.5% increase, another 100,000. So roughly say $600,000 additional that we would have seen that would have bumped up our revenue. But with 58 fewer students at that BEA rate of $10,379 is about $600,000 less in funding. So it basically offsets itself. And that's why we have seen this flat level of funding for several years is between the regionalization drop and the enrollment decline, it has basically been flat.
And the per pupil amount down in the center there, is that assuming that the negative enrollment will be entirely BEA students, or is that like a blended rate per pupil of the different rates that we get for the different types of students?
I just used BEA, but the difference is there may be 3 kids potential difference in there, and that's maybe a $3,000 difference. If we have 3 kids that are in ALE in that 58 and they're $1,000 less in their funding model, it's not a large dollar amount.
Gotcha. Okay, thank
and
you.
this is more of an example than an exact. The previous one was, okay, there's calculations behind that I've entered all the factors and I've entered the students and I've entered all these things to come up with those numbers. This one is just kind of a quick picture of why didn't it go up? If there's this IPD, why didn't we go up more than $20,000, something like that?
Gotcha. Thanks.
Yeah. So then quickly a little bit about, what I see with expenditures versus the revenue. We talked about the revenue being basically flat because IPD was 3.8%. Well, this is where it plays in the expenditure side when we talk about IPD. All of our collective bargaining agreements have a negotiated amount plus IPD. So if we look at the top one, it's 2.3% plus IPD, which is 5.5. So we are going to increase salary schedules for that contract by 7.8%. And this doesn't include any steps for education or experience. It's just, we're just going to move the salary schedule from here to here by 7.8%.
Dan, just indicate what the different unions are.
Oh,
for-
okay. Yeah, the first one, SWIA, is South Florida Education Association, which is basically the teachers. So our certificate instructional staff. PSE and SEIU are classified unions. PSE is predominantly our paraeducators, our secretaries, and any other support people that kind of feel in that professional realm. And SEIU is going to be bus drivers, mechanics, custodians, and food service. They're both classified, and we normally negotiate together with those. That's why you see the same type of language for both of them. So anyways, so what we will see is we'll see this increase in expenditures. So all these salary schedules are going to go up by 6.8 or 7.8%, depending upon which salary schedule people might be on. And we just looked at the fact that the revenue doesn't really increase. So as we build this budget, we have to take into account that there's going to be this differential that we have to adjust for. Then that's leading us down the road of, okay, we know how many students we think we have next year and where they are, which grades, which program, et cetera. Then we look at our staffing. So we need to match our staffing to our student needs and the programs that they require. And this is a quick 3-year look at what our staffing looks like, again, in those 3 different classifications. And what you'll notice that even though our student numbers have gone down, our staffing numbers have either gone up or remained the same. And this was intentional, realizing we were in a pandemic. We had a requirement to kids out to do social distancing, fewer kids in a classroom. They're going to need more support because of being out in a different environment for a while, behavioral needs, et cetera. So we knew that we needed to keep staff and to actually hire staff for specific reasons. So it wasn't that this was an accidental increase, it was planned, knowing that we also had federal dollars to help us offset these.
If you email that question, we can get the exact numbers.
Feel free to email me and I can give you anything. Okay, so when we start looking at what are our staffing needs for next year, this is what it would look like if we didn't change anything. And what we need to look at is, okay, what is the student need that corresponds to the staffing requirements go with it? And you will notice that we will have 154 fewer students next year than we had in 2019-20, but we have more staffing than we had at that time. So we will need to make adjustments that are appropriate so that the staffing matches the needs of our students and the programs they have. So that's the work that the administration is doing during the next month to determine what does the program look like, what are the needs of the program, what are the needs of the kids, all those pieces of, you know, that staffing conversation. And we do have some deadlines that we have to pay attention to. There's an April 1st deadline if we're going to make changes to administration. There's an April 15th deadline in the contract that says we have to give a tentative list to people. And then the May 15th is really the important one. And that's an RCW that if any certificated employee who does not receive notice by that time that they do not have a job the following year has a continuing contract. And once we get past May 15th, we have that employee for a year. There is no way to change that. So those are the deadlines that we have to work through. And that's why we're working now and have been for a while, figuring out what are the needs, what are the staffing needs, you know, what programs, all those things that are kind of part of that process. At the next board meeting, I will bring you a detailed revenue budget that by program that will show you where the money's coming from. And it'll be a kind of a breakdown of all those little snippets of categories. It's like how much of that is coming from local dollars within the buildings. What does that break down to? How much of that is state funding? What programs? How much do we get for the learning assistance program? How much do we get for whatever program it is that we will show you? But it'll be a very detailed, and at that time, it will be pretty close to what I believe. The only one I'm never sure of at this time of the year is our federal dollars, because they're a little later in getting that information out to us to be exact. But what I will give you is my expectation based upon pattern. Now, I know that for IDA for the last 3 years, it's been a 3% reduction over year to year. So, you know, I can anticipate it's going to be close to that. So there may be some modification later in the year for federal dollars, but they are categorical, which basically means that if we receive them, we have to spend them in those categories. So it's really not, from the budget process, it's not a big issue. We just adjust them at that point. Any questions I could answer for you?
Dan, I would just add that the categorical programs are also not fully funded. So for example, special education is funded at 20% of the rate it should be for federal sides. So there are specific categories when we look at those federal accounts that we would anticipate that they would run in a deficit, because they do in every district.
Yeah, a great example is one that's called IDEA, which is a special education grant. We're receiving currently about $317,000, which is about $3,000 less than the year before, $6,000 less. So where expenditures go up, that funding normally goes down. So it's one of those things where we're picking those differences up in basic education dollars. So bottom line is, it's like funding for school districts is one large pie, or think of it as a balloon. If you push on this side, it's going to pop out of this side. You can't make it bigger. So you have to figure out where the allocation is going to be that does the most good for the students. That's the conversation we have as administration on how do we do this, what's more important, you know, and kind of pick and choose, because you're right, there's so many things that are not fully funded, and it seems to be getting worse as we move along. And again, you know, we do have that large ESSER grant, $1 million, but we're already using that. and it will be gone after next year. And then we have to make adjustments again because we no longer have that $1 million. So that's part of the process we're going to be going through for a couple years, I think.
Somebody's cell phone continues to go off. You could silence it, that would be really helpful. One of the things that we talked about today, I had staff meetings today, which I will fill you in on a bit more later, but the idea that our students' social emotional needs are significant. And we received results of the Healthy Youth Survey, which is also something we'll go over in the future. So programmatically, it was the right decision to maintain the staffing. And it was with the intention of 1 year for many of the positions that we hired. But 1 year may not be sufficient. So we have a lot of work to do between now and the time we come back to the board with a plan for staffing. But it will be a reduced staff between this year and next year.
Well, and I want to recognize the fact that you told us this during, last year's budget, throughout that entire process, that we were only able to maintain this staff thanks to the ESSER, the federal funds. So I appreciate that, being very upfront about that from last year's budget through this.
The issue is that people are impacted. And that's the hard part. We know this is coming. We know we planned for it, but people are impacted in the meantime. So being sensitive to that, but also understanding that, yes, it was totally anticipated. And we've been upfront about it. And the bottom line is we make less than we spend. So we've been using fund balance, full knowledge of using that fund balance. And we're going to have to, by the third year, really pull all the way back so that we are making the revenue by month that meets the expenses by month. So thank you, Dan, as always.
Well, and that's why we've been building that fund balance, is for a rainy day like a pandemic. I mean, hopefully it wouldn't have been something like that, but so that we were prepared for something like this, which is.
Director Williford, I'd like to just weigh in a little bit more historical perspective. We have been building that fund balance for the decrease in regionalization. The pandemic was actually a benefit to the school from a financial perspective, but the fund balance was built up intentionally for regionalization decreases.
Thank you. Yes. As always, there's a lot of information there, but thank you for gathering it and presenting it in a relatively easily understandable method, as understandable as a governmental budget can be. I particularly appreciated the breakdown of MSOC costs, which was I don't know that it affects decision-making as much, but it's really interesting for me to know just where, because in previous budgets, it's been a block of MSOC. So I don't know, once a year or whatever, seeing that breakout is awesome for me. Just so that I can put context behind that single block number that we see so often. And I want to compliment you and the rest of the administration on the clear concern and effort that goes into building a budget that can sustain the livelihood of as many people in this community as possible. Recognizing when those staffing levels have to change and preparing for it so that people can prepare for it also, because having a change in life situation can be devastating, but having an unexpected change can be even worse. So thank you for the preparation that went into that, to let not only us, but those most likely to be impacted know.
Can I just add that, in addition to thinking about the hard reality of needing to come to a balanced budget, and thinking about the livelihood of those who might be impacted by a reduction in staff, also just gratitude for those people who are touching the lives of our students and the impact on students to have fewer caring adults to interact with and engage with, fewer specialists, fewer teachers and staff, whatever the reductions might be. I'm sure that the administration is working hard to reduce the harm to students through those reductions and to make sure that the most supportive programs and positions are retained, but I'm sure it's like comparing apples and oranges because students need a wide spectrum of support. So I imagine the complexities of decisions like these, and I think all those who are doing careful thinking on this subject.
Dan's not leaving the podium.
He'd be happy to.
No, we have some more important information. So, Mr. Pullman, if you'd like to move along with the affirmative action report. Thank
Be
you.
happy to speak to the affirmative action report. So we've had a couple goals in the last couple of years on this. And the first one was to help our administrative staff be more reflective of our staffing and our students. Traditionally, it's very male oriented. Happy to report that we did hire another wonderful in Kayla Phillips. So that actually almost balances. We have a 3-4 ratio. Big improvement from where we have been. And the second one is just reviewing our job descriptions, our documentation, and trying to remove anything that's going to create a hindrance or a bias for the people that are doing the work of interviewing, reviewing the applications, so that we have as fair a process as possible for any applicant that wants to apply. So that has been an ongoing thing, and I give Amanda Fisher a lot of credit for her work she does in this area. She's very passionate about, reaching out to other professionals in like positions and going to trainings to try to get more information about how we can improve the process. And then there's a list of the trainings that we do on an annual basis, and they're fairly similar. They change slightly from year to year based on some of the mandates that we receive, but it gives you an idea of the type of trainings that are required of all of our employees. And they're in a variety of different areas. There's been the equity training going on, which is a continuation of what we have been doing. Also, we're working, and I give Christy a lot of credit for the website, for updating it, making it more inclusive. Different things that she's done with that. Then if we look at, our hiring, there has been some slight changes in that. Look at the administrative staff, we talked about the change in the ratio of male to female. And then if we look at the elementary teaching staff, you'll see that there's a little, slightly 2% change in what we report as what people identified from, in that from last year, because it was totally 100% last year. So there's a little bit of a difference in there. Same thing in the certificated new hires. It stays pretty much the same when we talk about the male-female ratio. It's much higher than there are for male. But we're getting a little bit of a difference as we started identifying things. Last year, we identified 100% white. This year, it's 91%. So there's a slight improvement in some of these. The one that I don't know is an improvement on is the protected age status, those over age 40. That number is actually almost doubled from last year as a percentage. So I don't know if that's a reflection on our community or who applies for work. I don't know, but it's just one of those things. And then if we look at the classified hires, not really much of a difference in categories, except that coaches evidently look younger than they did a year ago. A year ago, the protected age class was 50%. This year, it's only 2%. So that was an interesting fact when I looked at that, is, that there's potentially some younger people that are coming into the coaching ranks, which is, I think, a real benefit for our kids, if that's really true. We do have an affirmative action plan that was written in 2016. It actually should be reviewed in the coming year. We no longer have to actually send it to OSBI. They used to require us to send it and they would approve it. We used to have to have it on file, but it'll be something for later in the spring when we get through some of the processes we work on now, is to review that and see if it's still relevant or if we need to make some changes to what that plan looks like. So that's one of the things that we still have some work to do on that. And then still recommending that we, continue to increase our diversity to match our student diversity, and then continue training in equity, inclusion, and those.
Yeah, I appreciate the effort put into this, because this is an incredibly important thing to have staff members that represent our student body, because it's much easier to make those connections when you see yourself in the groups that you're looking to. So I think that that's a fantastic goal that we've been working on, and clearly still have some work to do. But thank you for putting that together.
Thank you. I also appreciate your recommendation that we review the policy. I agree. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Pullman. We'll move on to the student board members' reports, or report. Paul and Audrey. Do we have a sharing?
Oh, did I
screen?
not share it? I apologize.
Yeah, if you send it to Christy, she'll share it for you.
Yeah, let me share it with you real quick. Audrey, could you do that, please? Ran out of battery. All right, so we have our monthly board update. The first, to mask or not to mask. This was the big topic of discussion in the student body this week and last week. So based on our estimate, mask wearing is split about 50-50. This is slowly changing, and we're seeing some changes this week, but the vast majority of students are accepting of others' choice, and only a few incidents of students making fun of other students' choices have been reported to us. So mask wearing is almost identical this week as last. I've seen some change. A few students have been deciding to not mask, but overall, probably seeing a slow decline in masking.
Yeah, Sol and I, in our past report, I think it was last month, we did an interview and got some student opinion before the mandate was lifted to kind of see if students would take their mask off, so how comfortable they felt. And I would say the opinions we got from that were reflected in the mask wearing we see today. Again, about 50-50. And I would say mask wearing continues to decline. And again, from what I've seen at the high school, there's been very little incidents of judging others' choices. So that's good.
All right, clubs. So the Social Justice Club has been celebrating Women's History Month through the announcements. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays, they choose, typically on Tuesdays and Thursdays, as long as they write it down, they choose an important women's history bio to present to the high school. I think that's a great example of our clubs taking initiative, deciding to put the work into action and presenting something that a topic that matters to them.
The Model UN Club has also been looking into more conferences to attend in the spring. We've attended about 4 so far, but we're hoping to attend more, especially once AP tests pass. And Change the Cycle Club also hosted a movie night last Friday that was a drive to bring in menstrual products. And then those will be going away to different shelters and organizations.
Yeah, and we're seeing an uptick in bake sales. Yes, hence the revenue. That's a very positive thing. except for, of course, possibly our health, but overall positive thing.
Okay, so leadership put together a capture the flag match last week at the high school. I was unfortunately in a board meeting and unable to attend, but I heard it went well. The leadership class also put together a bake sale yesterday to pull funds for Ukraine relief. And the leadership class as well is continuing to visit the elementary school and serve as role models and mentors for younger students. And I believe this is weekly.
Yeah, this is one of the things that we talked about last week, and Mr. Silva and Miss Richards, and it's one of those wonderful things that is going on behind the scenes. That is an absolutely wonderful example of what's going on at our schools. And then the ASB hasn't met as much as we usually do, but we're focusing on school spirit and, of course, prom. The juniors are working on prom preparations, which will be held at the country club.
And then at South Liberty Middle School 7-8 campus on Friday, 7th and 8th graders will be having an assembly that is planned for by ASB. On Friday as well, there's going to be a movie night and a snack fundraiser to raise funds for ASB. And I also talked to the PR of Middle School ASB, and they're looking forward to student participation in Spirit Week next week. So that was exciting. South Liberty Middle School is also collaborating with the Center for Online Safety to present to students 5th through 8th graders on digital footprints and text impact, especially on students. And students will be working with Lisa Honnold to create a more impactful presentation.
All right, so NSBA San Diego. So 3 of us up here are going to go down to San Diego to represent our district and our state. And I guess this is where we open up to what does our board want us to do down there? What do we want to focus on as successes in our district? So Audrey and I are actually putting together a presentation with other student reps from across the state to present in session 1. And we want to highlight some of our successes in our district. And then what do we want to communicate to legislators and NSBA lobbyists on behalf of our district? And then what do we need at a federal level, because it's a federal conference, and what knowledge we should bring back. So this is where we have to figure out what are our priorities and what do we want to get out of this experience.
Is that a question?
It is.
Set of questions?
Yeah, it's
just off the top of my head, I'd love to offer some responses to these written questions. I think that the presentations from students that we saw tonight are a wonderful thing to celebrate as our successes. The ALE program, the success of this first year pilot, and the opportunity for outside the box thinking like that going forward. To communicate to legislators and lobbyists on behalf of our district, I think there are unique needs in a smaller rural district, especially around funding, and especially given the pressures of our geography around housing prices, and the impact of that on enrollment. So continuing to advocate for adequately funding beyond basic education for the well-being of every student. I think what we need at a federal level is to recognize that mental health and social emotional health are key ingredients in preparing students to achieve academic success. And those things do require skilled staff, and those staff members need to be funded. And as far as knowledge to bring back, I would say I'd love to hear what you love about the experience, because I think your passion for what you learn is going to inspire the next generation of student board members. Thank you.
I think I would also echo Marnie in terms of successes for our district ALE program. I would also add to that our community center, and how Gail essentially built that in 3 months and after it was launched. So I think that is a huge success. I also think of the work that we have done in collaboration with our students to change the culture in South Whitby School District. And while we are not there all yet, the progress that we've made, I think, is surpassing what other districts may find it helpful and inspiring. In terms of what do we need at a federal level, we need them to fund the federal programs would be fantastic. And to actually fund them in the way that they should be funding them and not reducing costs, as Dan has eloquently put out there that they're currently doing. I think in terms, I would also echo Marnie's sentiment of there's a larger microcosm, it being from an island. If we do not have affordable housing, it's not possible necessarily for teachers to commute the way that you can on a mainland. So I think, for example, my time in Lake Washington working as a teacher clearly could not afford to live in Kirkland or Redmond. I lived outside of those areas, but I could at least commute in. And with our current ferry system, with our remoteness, that's not necessarily feasible or doable. And so looking at just from a community standpoint, how can we increase that? And I think that would not only help South Whitby, but it would also help Pupil, it would help Oak Harbor, it would help San Juan's, it would help Orcas Island, because they also struggle with those issues. And in terms of what should you bring back, I would be really interested to hear what other districts who are experiencing funding challenges, what they do to meet student needs. I would also be interested in hearing from other remote districts to see what they are doing in terms of recruitment and retention of qualified staff, and how they have shifted their educational programming to adjust for that.
Great, thank you. That's all really good.
Have you written it all down?
No,
that's a lot of stuff.
well, yeah. So we'll put together all of that and we'll see what we can do. I have a meeting with some of the NSBA staff, mostly focused on more national issues, but all of those issues that affect our community and communities around the state are more of a priority for us as members of the South Whitby community and South Whitby School District.
Well, I would actually add to that it's not, islands have it especially painful when it comes to that distance, but there are lots of small rural communities out there that have the same problems we do, where there are no population centers near the schools except the one population center. And so there aren't those options like there are around Kirkland or Redmond and that sort of thing.
You look at Index with their 54 students in their district, right?
Yeah.
Like very, very small.
I'd note a couple other things to really trumpet and highlight would be, I agree completely with the ALE program and the community center, but also the gardens and the way that we're tying that in with our food service program and with community food service programs also. And also the implementation of the ethnic studies and environmental sciences classes. The amazingly quick implementation of that and how we're seeing benefits in school culture. I don't know that we can directly attribute them to that, but it certainly isn't hurting based on the reports that you've given us from the freshmen who are participating in that. I would also say I'd love to hear ways to effectively bring student voice into board discussions, because we're doing some of it, but I always want to find more ways to broaden that student voice and deepen it.
Well, our presentation is actually on student voice. It's on what is Washington State doing on student voice and why the rest of the country should do what we're doing. But the reality is that Washington State isn't doing enough on student voice. So thank you, because that's really important for us to communicate the shortfalls and also the successes. But yes, thank you.
Well, and to hear what other districts around the country are doing. We learned some things at the WASDA conference that were fantastic. Some ideas that we've been trying to implement or bringing up or discussing at a future board meeting, but finding out what they're doing in Florida or Minnesota or anywhere around the country is also fantastic.
I just have to chime in with one comment. I think what we've done on student voice has been amazing. We've gone from 0 to 60. So credit where credit is due. It may not be what our student reps think is the ultimate, but it has gone from students doing reports at a board meeting about activities to actually directing change in our district that has been significant, whether it's ethnic studies or the way we handle discipline or the change in culture. There's been a lot of student voice that has been heard and has made change. So don't sell us short as not doing enough to hear student voice, please.
And if I may just add, I want to acknowledge our previous student board members who have helped pave the way for this this current moment where we finally have kind of collective weight behind the movement towards more adequate representation of student voice on the board. And just to say that it's a slow process sometimes to shift culture and to create inclusion and to welcome more voices to the table, or to even to welcome more people to help construct a better table. And so I want to thank all those students who've given their voice in whatever way they can in the past. And tonight was such a fine example of seeing another generation of students lending their voice to our conversations.
I want to just note, Anne, if there's anything you want to add in there. Okay. I figured, but I just wanted to make that a reaching out through the door rather than just having the door open. Audrey, Saul, do you have what you were looking for from us?
Well, I think so. I
Okay.
think
Yeah.
we got what we're looking for, and
And-
we'll continue to try to figure out what our priorities are, how we can best communicate them, and if we have 2 weeks to figure it out.
And Joe, I know that you're actually going to be there, but
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We can strategize about this stuff on our way there and throughout the weekend. Looking forward to being the delegation from South Whidbey at this national conference.
Yeah, just following up, I really appreciate what everyone shared. I'm really excited to represent our district and also connect with other districts and be able to bring back the connections and keep them for the future and build off of them. So
anything else in the report? Or was that the last slide?
I think that adjourns our report. Thank you,
Okay.
Brooke.
Thank you very much for keeping this an interactive experience. I think that that's really important to have the give and take in those student board member reports. And so I appreciate that very much. Dr. Moshe, superintendent report.
There is actually no need for me to share a slide. It's only got 3 words on it. So I'm going to give you some updates tonight. Number 1 is the Island Shakespeare Festival. The board will be hearing from Island Shakespeare probably in the next month or 6 weeks. They are staying put for this summer season and plan to put on a full schedule. And they are getting back to doing the environmental impact that is needed so that they can move into the woods adjacent to the South Campus. So that is still in their plans. And they've been working with parks as well because there is an easement and their intention is to do a capital campaign potentially and build some structures that may be on the park's land. Anyway, it would be a cooperative venture. So they'll be back in front of the board at some point in the near future. If you have the opportunity to hold Friday, April 22nd in your schedule, we will be down at the outdoor classroom during the annual salmon release, but it will also coincide with finally 2 years later, the dedication of the outdoor classroom in Rini Neff's honor. As you know, Rini was instrumental in starting the outdoor classroom and teaching, and just an amazing community member, also involved with Alan Shakespeare and so on. And she passed away, and the board made that decision after the committee met and made the recommendation. In light of a recent passing of Dr. Julie Haddon, the superintendent is calling another committee together to consider honoring Dr. Haddon by potentially naming the boardroom as in her honor. So you have policy on the process for that. So we'll be back to you in the near future. As I said earlier, I had 2 staff meetings. I basically met with all of the staff today, 2 different times, elementary or K-6 and then 7-12. 2 years almost to the day that I met with them, telling them that I thought we'd be closed for 2 weeks based on the governor's order. And you know how that turned out. So we talked through that. We talked through the trauma that has gone on for 2 years for not only our students, but our staff. And it was really a good conversation that ended really in giving them a huge thank you for all the work that has gone on for our students and for themselves with each other, and the support that has been shown. We are a district that, again, lots of forethought, lots of planning support throughout the process. And they too, probably 50-50 wearing masks or not. It's a choice, and those choices are honored. And so it was nice to be in the same room together. And then the last thing is just a reminder, because I know in terms of meeting with staff today, that we're all ready for a break. So we're not racing to June. We're just trying to get to the end of next week and take a little break in April, because we need it. So that's all I have.
Thank you. I'd also note that up here on the podium, we are 50-50 masked or not, just reflecting the district. Thank you. We move on to board comments or reports. Do any board members have anything they'd like to note?
As our legislative representative, I just want to note that the League of Education Voters did an excellent presentation on what Washington students got during this legislative session. Unfortunately, I left the notebook with my notes for that at home. So I'll tell you that it was great and I learned a lot. And maybe at my next opportunity, I can report back on the details. Thank you.
I'm not seeing anything else, so I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you.